we started having so many of those people come in with these sitting related overuse injuries. What we realized is that in this fitness world, we created this culture where we told everybody, in order to be healthy, check your healthy box. You go to the gym for 1 hour and then you're like done. And the data is really frightening. Like Americans are spending 20 minutes a week outside.
If you go outside first thing in the morning and you get some daylight in your eyes, it actually neurologically has such a huge impact on the positive rhythms of your brain, and it stabilizes you and you will feel a bit calmer.
I think we all know the basics. Eat fruits and vegetables, eat some protein, got to lift a weight, you got to get some cardiovascular exercise, you need to have friends, you got to go outside, you got to sleep. It's not that complicated. What it is, though, is hard. I'm more a fan of an 8,000 step requirement. There's very good research to show that you get the lion's share of the benefit of steps at about 8,000. And interestingly, in cultures where people sit on the ground, toilet on the ground, sleep on the ground, like Japan, for example, the fall risk in the elderly is near zero.
Juliet, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Emily.
So I want to talk to you about longevity in the age of face creams and endless potions and lotions and types of Botox and so on, and all of these therapies that we can go to. What is your view on longevity, what it actually means, and a healthy approach to it?
Oh man, I mean, I actually, if I'm being honest, I'll just start by saying I hate the word longevity, and maybe because it's just so popular right now, I'm kind of over it. But I personally prefer the word durability, and that is what I am going for. And what I mean by that is that, and I think another word for that is health span. But I like the idea, and it's motivating for me to build a durable body. And, you obviously are younger than me. But I think the human experience is that we all go through difficult things, right? The human experience is that we're going to get sick, we're going to get injured. Unfortunately, some of us are going to get cancer. We're going to have grief, loss, periods of stress in our life, right? Like this is part of the human experience. And so what I'm going for is to have a body that is durable enough to both perform when I'm feeling great and also be durable enough to sort of get through the difficult times in life. And on top of that, I don't really care if I live to be 100. Like I'm not one of those people taking 75 supplements a day in order to try to beat the clock. Like I really do want to live as healthy as I can for as long as I can and be able to keep moving and enjoy my family as long as I can. And if that's 85, great. If that's, 82, great. What I really want to avoid is, what Peter Attia calls sort of the marginal decade where, you like spend the last 10 years of your life in a skilled nursing facility. So those are my two goals. I think as women, since you brought up like skincare and, aesthetic treatments as sort of the primary thing, I mean, I think it really is, there's so much available and there's so much to be done. And I also think women are being held to impossible standards as they age still. I just had this lovely text with my best friend from childhood the other day, and she said to me, direct quote, "I feel like I am fighting aging and losing."
Mm.
And I think that's a shitty way to feel. I feel like that's created externally. And what she means by that is her outward appearance, right? She has a few more wrinkles than she'd like. And and she's not someone who can afford to spend $50,000 a year on her face or whatever, right? Again, no judgment on what everyone wants to do, but I do wish and hope we can get to a place where like women in particular can focus more on things like building muscle and eating well and sleeping and having solid relationships versus I think where we often are, which is still toxic cardio, lots of restriction, lots of, face procedures. It'd be nice if we could find a better balance there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting narrative. The example you gave, I think the fighting, aging, and losing, because that is exactly of how you would be presenting yourself, and really you're basing that on comparison of what people or society or brands who are, amazing marketers, expert marketers at selling you all of these things, that is really quite an interesting example of that, because then obviously you look at longevity and durability and what that health span actually is in terms of, well, can you actually stand up without taking 10 minutes to do it, or holding on to everything in sight. And it's an interesting conversation of actually what is health span and what is just living to 100 and patting yourself on the back, but actually you've not been able to do any of the things that you love for that long. And I
Yeah.
think it's quite a blurred line of, we can look young, but actually not be able to do any of the things that we want to do that gives us that quality of life. So it is an interesting sort of comparison of actually what does that mean? And I think I completely agree with you in the word longevity. It's turned into a bit of a marketing buzzword of, this will give you
Yes.
something that glow is always a word, or things like that, that will be popping in there. And then there's loads of people who are saying it's all a myth, and then it just gets all a little bit murky. So
Oh my God, so murky, so murky. And, I just want to add something that, reminded me about this. Like for me, my goal, and everybody can come up with their own goal, but my own like durability goal is I want to be able to say yes. I want to have a body that can say yes to adventure.
Mhm.
And that is very wide ranging. I am a very sporty person. I like to mountain bike and hike and backpack and run river trips and do all this stuff. And not everybody has to be like that. But, if I get invited for my friend's 50th birthday party and she's like, I want to go skiing in Greenland, I want to be able to say yes to that. Or, if I, you know, if I'm I'm in my 50s, but if I'm in my 60s and my kids have kids and they say, hey, we want to go with your grandkids on a backpacking trip in Europe, I want to be able to say yes to that. Right. And so I
Mhm.
think some of this does require some like intentionality about, and for each of us, it will be different what we want. But what do we want our later years of life, our current and later years of life to look like? What do we want to be able to do with our bodies? And you're right, part of it is, just the aesthetics of looking good, but a huge part of it is, because we can't fight all aging, a huge part of it is like, what can you actually do with your body? I mean, I'm going to give one example. I have a friend, Ben, who last year he had a baby, and both of his mothers-in-law came to stay with them. And he said it was so stark because his own mother was very stiff and limited, very overweight, very unhealthy, and couldn't really help take care of the baby that much. She couldn't comfortably sit on the floor with the baby. She couldn't get up and down off the floor. Like, she tired easily. She wasn't as able to help. And then he said his wife's mother, who's like just a total spitfire, has totally paid attention to her health, was like this high functioning grandmother helper who was like sitting on the floor with the baby and up and down off the floor, could carry the baby for 2 hours. And he said the contrast was so stark to him, right? So whether or not you're like me, where you want to be able to say yes to going skiing in Greenland when you're older, or whether you want to be able to like, be a functional grandparent, like we all have goals. So like, what are your goals?
Yeah. I definitely think you should hold on to that friend who wants you to go skiing in Greenland, because that sounds like a good one. But it's yeah, it's interesting. That's exactly what the health span is, because that is actually health. That is you doing things that make you feel whole together, that give you joy, that give you that positive feeling, that make you have the connection with, your children, your grandchildren, everything like that. And then you've also done you've written several books. And one of the books I want to talk to you about is the book Deskbound that you co-wrote with your husband. And I just think, firstly, great title.
Thank you.
I think all of us can feel a little bit desk bound at times, even like no matter what we're doing. And then you think, gosh, if we're outside in nature for a day and we're out walking or we're out doing exercise or whatever sort of thing makes you tick, you can feel so alive, so connected to nature. You can feel like your heart rate variability has gone down because you feel a bit calmer. And there's so many tangible things that I'm sure a lot of people will be able to identify. Or even people who live in a city, they go out and they're like, I'm going to go and touch some grass. And they obviously say it jokingly, but it's like, I need to see something green that's not concrete. So talk to me about firstly kind of what you discuss in the book Deskbound, where it came about, because I just love to hear more about it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for asking about that because nobody asks us about Deskbound anymore. And it is funny because I still see so much stuff come across my Instagram about, not being sedentary and going outside. And I'm always like, hey, like we wrote a whole
Yeah.
book about that. I mean, it's been a really long time. It came out 10 years ago, literally.
It's so
Uh,
important though. It's so
it's so
important.
important. And, it's funny because the research keeps piling up, right? Like there was a lot of research when the book came out about how bad it is to be sedentary and that, the research has continued to pile up that it's really not great for us. So, the backstory of that book is at the time we wrote it, we still owned a commercial gym in San Francisco. And that gym was also a hybrid physical therapy clinic. So we had some physical therapists who were physical therapist coaches, and then we ran like a regular commercial gym. So we were able to sort of see people who were working through injuries and post surgery and, dealing with physical challenges. And at the same time, trying to coach people to like feel awesome and do pull ups and all the things you do in a gym. But what we noticed was that our normal gym members who were, the avatar would be like, a 40-year-old investment banker with like two little kids. And he'd come in the morning and he'd like smash himself because it was a CrossFit gym. He'd like smash himself doing a CrossFit workout. But then he would sit for 12 hours and then we would see him in our physical therapy clinic and he would be complaining of like severe neck pain or back pain. And we started having enough of those type of clients. And by the way, they weren't getting injured exercising. Um, and we started having so many of those people come in with these sort of like sitting related overuse injuries. When you do an evaluation with any client, you say, okay, what's your sleep like? What's your eating like? What's your habits like? What we realize is that in this fitness world, we created this culture where we told everybody like, okay, great. Like in order to be healthy, check your healthy box. You go to the gym for 1 hour and then
Mhm.
you're like done then. And I think that was one of the worst things we did in the health and fitness business was tell people that you check your box of health by going to this 1 hour workout class and that then you're fine. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Like human beings need to be in constant movement and that you can there's actually research to show that if you work out for an hour a day and then sit for 12 hours you effectively cancel out the adaptation to that workout, the positive adaptation. So that's bad. We were again seeing all these people who were like, well, I exercise but I don't understand, I tore my Achilles. And we're like, well, that's great, you exercise, but for 12 hours of the day you're sitting with all your joints at 90-degree angles and that's going to have a cost and an impact. So that led us down this path of researching, what it means to be sedentary and sedentary. There's a whole field of like sedentary biology. And it's not good when you start to look at the data and research about sitting all the time. Not only is it responsible for a lot of orthopedic and musculoskeletal injuries and pains and nagging injuries. It's really bad for our metabolic health. And again, human beings need to be moving. And, I'm going to contrast that with the latest trend in fitness, which I think is an awesome one. And that is that people are lifting weights. That is awesome. I think it's a great trend. But because we seem I don't know if it's just human beings to be like all or nothing. So now everyone's like, just weightlifting, which is fine too, except for, the research shows that the people who live the longest and live the healthiest are people who it's their total daily movement that really matters. So yes, you need to strength train. Yes, you need to condition, but you also need to be moving throughout your day. And an important distinction because, people like after we wrote that book, like Kelly and I would be sitting in an airport and people would see us and be like, wait, you guys are sitting, like almost like busting us for sitting, like I'm sitting right now during this podcast. We are not anti-sitting. Like sitting is awesome. But what is bad is accumulating hours and hours and hours every day of sitting, and especially hours in a row, which is what office workers almost do. You plop down in your chair, you sit there, you don't move from 9 until 1 when you go take lunch. And so, what we really recommended in that book is to create what we call a movement rich environment in your workplace, in your home. So if you took a little hidden camera and followed me throughout my workday, like for a, 10-hour workday, you would see that I sit for part of my day because there's certain things like podcasting I prefer to do while I'm sitting. After this, I'll do some computer work where at my standing desk. I will sit on the floor for part of the day. I actually have a call in a few hours that is just a phone call. So I'm going to put in my headphones and I'm going to walk around my neighborhood while I'm taking that call. So what we've really tried to say is like, we need more movement. Like my whole personal mission in life is just to help people move more. And, it's really hard to move a lot when you're just sitting all the time. Man, people could make a huge difference in their health and how they feel. And then I also, if I haven't gone on too long, want to make a point about this going out thing. We had a guy on our podcast named Jared Hanley, and he runs a company called Nature Quant, where they quantify how much time people go out in nature. And they have an app, which for your listeners is free, called Nature Dose. I don't know if it works in Scotland, whether it's gone international, but in the US, they've mapped the entire United States. And if you put the app on your phone, it's free. It can tell you how much time you've spent indoors versus outdoors. And the data is really frightening. Like Americans are spending like 20 minutes a week outside, which like when you hear that, you're like, what? Like, how is that possible? Like that is a frightening statistic, right? And that's, by the way, like year round. That's not just because it's like cold in the winter or something. The other thing we talk about a lot is, man, you got to go outside. Like human beings are meant to move a lot and we're meant to go outside, even in inclement weather. Like we'll be fine if we go outside when it's snowing or whatever. But we do need to go outside. There's lots of amazing research to show that in communities, for example, well-designed communities where people have access to trails and parks and access to nature, all of their health markers go up. I mean, people are less obese, they're less metabolically sick, they live longer, they feel happy, their mental health is better. There's certainly like something to nature. And in fact, we had another guy on our podcast whose whole job is at Texas A&M is to research the positive effects of nature. And they actually now go around to doctors' offices and conferences and they teach doctors how to like literally prescribe going outside for people as a thing, like not a joke, like literally like you could go to your doctor and they could say like what you're missing here is going outside and you need to do that. That was a
Mhm.
really long answer to Deskbound, but
No, that was
it's all
amazing.
connected.
It is all connected, and I think I love the examples that you use because it's not that you have to start work at 3 a.m. and finish at 7 and then go for a 5-hour hike to get your fresh air and then you come back and then you've got to do some more work. It's, your example of you're going to go for a walk around outside because you have a phone call, and it's just those tangible ways of actually incorporating it in, because we all need to work and we all will probably need to use a desk and we'll all need to sit. Those are things that are just very ingrained in where we're at the minute. And it's something that we can't avoid, but it is adding those extra bits in, which I do think, people have those 10,000 steps challenge that they do. It becomes a little bit of a like a fad and you think, whoa, everyone's going for it. But actually it's really good because you kind of need to go outside. Like you can't really do 10,000 steps in your house unless you live somewhere very, very big. So you need to
Yeah.
go somewhere. It's just interesting how where we're at now, everything is online. You can work from home, you can work remotely, you can be staring at a screen. Find it funny I stare at a medium screen all day and then I go home and then I stare at a small screen and treat myself by staring at a large screen. No, it's obviously, TV, computer and phone. And
Yeah.
it's so bizarre because meetings aren't face to face anymore. Like there's
No.
so many different parts. We're not just talking about this physically, because obviously a huge part of what you do will be the physical side of it. But if you go outside first thing in the morning, before you stare at a phone, before you have any blue light, and you get some daylight in your eyes, doesn't need to be sunny, it can be overcast, it can be
Mm.
rainy, just daylight. Like it actually neurologically has such a huge impact on the positive rhythms of your brain, and it stabilizes you and you will feel a bit calmer, and it really is a benefit for you, and you just need to do that for a few minutes. And then you think, well, if you go outside and you have a walk, then you're connecting with nature. Even if you're on the phone, even if you're on a meeting, if you have a meeting with someone, or you meet someone outside, you have that human connection. Then you have this bonding experience because you're doing something with someone else. And there's so many different ways that it can be facilitated, that in this age of technology being the answer for everything, it actually is the cause of a lot of issues as well, because it's so distracting, because we could just
Yeah.
binge watch a Netflix series instead of, going outside for a walk. Like, why would we do that? And I think such a good hack for it is getting a pet, like getting a dog. You have
Oh,
to go outside several times a day, or you're going to have a very messy house. And depending what type of dog you have, you might need to exercise them a lot. And it's just that non-negotiable. It's like almost like a chore you're creating for yourself, yet it's a really good chore because it has so many benefits. It's quite a funny one when you think about it. But it's
oh,
those
yeah.
habits that I guess you do a lot of. It's those habit creation cycles.
Yeah, I think first of all, I couldn't agree more about the dog thing, by the way. When I've worked with clients who really struggle to move a lot, one of my recommendations is get a dog because, again, there are certain people who like, they'll go to the gym, but then they just can't motivate to move. And I'm like, get a dog because you've got to go outside at least twice a day with your dog. And, when in my own neighborhood, the people I see out walking all have dogs. And you rarely see people walking who don't have dogs. So there's something to that. So yeah, I mean, my whole mission in life now is to try to help people because I think we are all fire hosed with information. I think we all know the basics. I think people know they need to eat fruits and vegetables. They need to eat some protein. You've got to lift a weight. You got to get some cardiovascular exercise. You need to have friends. You got to go outside. You've got to sleep, right? Like it's not that complicated. It really is not that complicated. What it is, though, is hard. So I think that's an important distinction. The habits themselves are not complicated. They're easy and they're nobody who's worth their weight in salt disagrees that these are the things you're supposed to do. So, I mean, like, cast aside all this BS on the internet, like learn how to do those things. But I also think that there's so many barriers to doing the right thing in our cultures. One of the barriers, and I alluded to this earlier, but we really did, I think, when gym culture arose, which I think people must think people have been going to the gym forever, but they really haven't. Like people didn't really start going to the gym until like the 80s with aerobics, and then it's exploded since then. So we have all gotten the message that you have to exercise and people are doing it. They're spending tons of money on going to the gym. They're doing their 1 hour of exercise. But anybody who looks at our health data can tell that it's not working. We're getting sicker. It's not helping. So what is missing from that? And my theory is it's this total movement. That yes, you do need to do that formal exercise, but you also need to be very conscious about adding in total movement. Now, look, I am not one of those fitness influencers who spends my day like meal prepping my food and sitting in my sauna. I sit in front of the computer all day, like everybody listening to this. Like that's what I do. So I've had to figure out ways to add more movement into my life. And, first of all, I'm more a fan of an 8,000 step requirement. And there's very good research to show that you get the lion's share of the benefit of steps at about 8,000. The other reason I like that number is that it's much more achievable for people who have lives and kids and jobs. It's more achievable than 10,000 steps. And what I want to say is, I get 8,000 steps a day without ever going for like a walk, so to speak. I get it by, I get a couple thousand steps through my like normal activities of daily living, cooking and, moving around and going from place to place, whatever. I get some steps there. I try to take at least one walking meeting during my workday. I try to take a 10-minute walk after my workout and a 10-minute walk after my meals. My husband and I take a little walk after dinner. And then I easily crest 8,000 steps a day with just a little bit of attention to it throughout my workday. At no point am I like, I'm going for a 1 hour walk. I never do that. I'm just adding in a lot of movement. And I think sometimes people say like, why steps? Like, why steps? Well, for me, steps is just a proxy for total movement. It's the best way we have to tell if we're moving enough as a human. And everybody has a step tracker, and then that is your iPhone sitting in your pocket. And obviously, you have to be carrying it all the time to know. And I have a Garmin on and an Aura, and I'm a nerd and I like tracking all this data, but I don't think people need to do that. Like, honestly, go to Amazon and buy an $8.99 pedometer and wear that thing around. And like, that is the greatest piece of health data that you can track because it's a proxy for total movement. And you're going to learn really quickly, are you someone who is effectively, if you're getting 3,000 steps a day, even if you're doing a workout, like, you are sedentary. People don't like
Mhm.
hearing that. No one wants to be called sedentary, especially not the exercisers among us. That really bothers them because they feel like they've won at life by going to the gym. And they really are upset when you tell them that they're sedentary because they're like, I go to the gym. And it's just not enough total movement. But again, you do not need to quit your job and become a fitness influencer to get this much movement in your day. You really don't. You do have to bring some intention to it. Um, and that's saying, okay, rather than, finishing my dinner and going immediately to watch Netflix, I'm going to go for this 20-minute walk and then I'm going to watch Netflix. And I
Mhm.
like net like I mean I'm like in the middle of like two shows right now on Netflix. I'm all about it. Like, I love TV. I'm a fan of TV. It's like how I decompress. I love TV. I, by the way, sit on the floor while I watch TV, which is something we can talk about. But there's
We will
so
talk
many
about that, don't you worry.
there's so many ways that you can add in movement into your day in micro ways, and it all counts. It all counts. Even, I have some friends who do research at Stanford on movement snacks. I don't know if that's a term you've heard before, but even just standing up from your desk at work and doing like 20 air squats every half an hour, like, already that's amazing. If you can't leave your office or don't have a chance to walk or it's snowing or whatever, just like get up every 20 or 30 minutes and do 20 air squats. Even that is like gigantic and important.
I do think you're really spot on when you say, we tick the fitness box and we think, well, that's great. I've had my hour workout. I've been in my active clothes. I've had my protein shake and now I'm off and I'm good to do whatever, whether that's eating whatever or doing nothing. And it's a really interesting phenomenon really because it is that total health. And I think sometimes we really discard any other type of movement. Like if you're working in a restaurant, you are flipping active, you will be
Yes.
doing so many steps. You'll be carrying heavy plates. You'll be clearing things. You'll be bending in different angles and stretching in different ways. And you're going to be knackered. And you may think, oh my goodness, like I've not done any exercise today because I didn't go to a gym and I didn't put on my, workout clothes and I didn't start my Garmin and record it on Strava or whatever it is. But it's such a weird narrative that when we say it out loud, but I do think that we can all be guilty of it, of not counting movement in this sort of quantifiable way that we're told it is. And just as you say, if we're doing air squats, doesn't mean it doesn't count as exercise. And sure, it's a smaller amount. And maybe if we're in a gym, we're going to have a more condensed period because that's our time to do it. But sporadically doing it throughout the day as well. I mean, you've literally said it's arguably even more beneficial because you're actually not sitting there and seizing up and tensing up and hunching over in all the really unnatural positions that we find ourselves in. And it's only really when you see someone with a beautiful posture that you kind of straighten yourself up, or you look in the mirror or like see a photo of yourself in a lovely outfit and you think, imagine if I had my shoulders back more, because we are hunched over and it's that conscious adaptation of standing up tall, shoulders back, and then you feel a lot more. You can actually breathe better as well.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
actually have that full inhale and exhale. And there's so much research behind how that, like, one or two inhales or exhales will just ground you so much more. And you suddenly feel that a bit more connection to your body and where you actually are at, not just flighting from one thing to the next. And you alluded, Juliet, to the sitting on the floor. And I want to talk to you about your views on sitting on the floor and movement generally, because of course now people are going to think, hold on, I thought we weren't supposed to sit. And now we're sitting on the floor. That's even worse. So talk to me about that and also your challenge that you have or your standing test
Yeah, yeah.
that you
So
like to have.
yeah, and as I said before, I'm, all about like I someone once told me like this phrase that I think about a lot during my workday, which is like your next position is your best position. And for me, that's like a cue to keep moving. So as I said before, not anti-sitting at all. I'm a fan of sitting, and I'm especially a fan of floor sitting. And I'll tell you why. First of all, in the US, I don't have a UK data, but my guess is that it tracks. The number one accident related cause of death in people over 65 is falls. None of us want to take a fall and have that be the end. And 65 is not that old. So it's pretty amazing to think that that's so common. But, one of the ways to combat that is actually to actually practice getting up and down off the ground, which is this basic human skill. And we opened our most recent book, Built to Move, with something, our first chapter is called the sit and rise test. You can go to 1,000 websites. You can just type in sit and rise test on the internet, and you can easily find this anywhere. And basically the test, and it was done by a combo of Brazilian and American researchers, and they found that the ability to get up and down off the floor, and I can explain what the test is, was correlated with longevity and overall morbidity and mortality. The way the test works is, if you're standing there, you cross your legs from a standing position, and then you slowly lower yourself to the ground until you're sitting in a cross-legged position. And then the hard part comes in, where then you're meant to stand back up from that same cross-legged position, ideally with as few points of contact on the floor as possible. And it's graded out of 10. So if you think about, you lower yourself to the ground, and in order to kind of break your fall to the ground, you put a hand down, that's -1. And then in order to get up, you need to put a knee down and a hand down, that's another -2. So you got a 7 out of 10. So anything over an 8 out of 10 is great. So people often, when they do the test, think they have to do it perfectly, but they don't. You can still use a couple points of contact and be fine. The reason that we love this test so much is that it's, for many people, the first time they're getting an insight into how immobile they have become, probably from all the sitting they're doing and then exercising without doing any mobility work. It also can be a giant wake up call for people to realize that this basic human skill, which is getting up and down off the ground, children do it like 100 times a day. Toddlers do it like 1,000 times a day, getting up and down off the ground. This like real functional human skill is something that we've all lost because our environments are not set up to tax the skill anymore. It also gives you some really good insight into your hip and ankle range of motion, which are kind of our big movers. Lack of hip range of motion is a huge contributor to this horrible scourge of low back pain, of other physical challenges and injuries. So it's something we also want to avoid. And interestingly, in cultures where people sit on the ground, toilet on the ground, sleep on the ground, like Japan, for example, and, India, plenty of other cultures, the fall risk in the elderly is near zero. So that's pretty significant. And on top of that, the amount of orthopedic injuries, joint replacements, low back pain, incidents of low back pain are way less. Getting up and down off the ground is like this basic fundamental human skill that we need to practice and keep doing. And then we need to be able to comfortably sit on the ground. And what I love about sitting on the ground is, number one, it forces you to practice getting up and down off the ground at least twice or once each direction. And number two, it's like a sneaky mobility practice, especially for those of you who know you're never, ever going to actually do anything formal to mobilize your body. You maybe have decided you're never going to get out a foam roller or lacrosse ball or do anything kind of formal to work on your body. But you can get so much benefit, especially when it comes to your hip mobility, by just sitting on the floor. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. When I sit on the floor, I sit cross-legged, I kneel for a little while, I sit 90-90, kind of like a hurdler, long sit with my feet out in front of me. Sometimes I'll go into the splits. But I mean, people are shocked when they sit on the floor for 30 minutes a day and sort of change positions and work on this position, how much better and less stiff their overall body feels. How much better they feel when they go into the gym, how much better they feel walking and doing the sports they love and playing pickleball. If there's someone who suffered from low back pain, we've seen lots of people who have real improvement in low back pain. And here's the reason I think it's so awesome is that everybody has time to do it, because you can do it while you're doing something else I know you're doing, which is watching TV. I don't know, again, the UK data. In America, we're watching 3 hours a day of television. And this is everybody, by the way. There's always going to be these people who are like, oh no, not me. But like, everybody's watching TV and they're doing a lot of it. So what we do in our household is, if we're watching a show, like for at least 30 minutes of it or an hour, like we sit on the floor in front of our couch on the ground and we just noodle around in a floor sitting position. And it's like, we're already watching TV. So nobody has an excuse. And the other time that I do it, as I mentioned this earlier, is if I'm working at home more often than I'm at my office. But if I am lucky enough to be working at home, I will spend part of my workday with my computer on my coffee table and sitting on the ground working that way. So I figure out different ways to incorporate in floor sitting. So yes, total movement does matter, but I think people would be surprised how good they felt if they actually also added in some floor sitting, which everybody has time to be doing.
Mobility is a really funny one, isn't it? Because it's like the really unsexy big sister to exercise because
Yes,
no one
so
really wants
unsexy.
to
No,
record a mobility session or tell people about, oh yeah, I got up early to do a mobility session. You say, oh,
no,
really?
no, it's
Yeah,
not
that's not going to
sexy.
make me feel great or give me the endorphins. And the ironic thing is that it'll actually probably enable us to be doing the things that we like for longer. But it's that
True fact.
like delayed gratification in the extreme because also you can't really imagine not being able to do the things that we're able to do now. It's so gradual, the decline of mobility and movement and the accessibility that we have for that. And you'd rather get up and smash a CrossFit class and tick the box and then, have your high protein whatever and then head off to sit inside all day and stare at a screen. And it's strange that that is us winning at life. Like that narrative, that is you winning at life because you have got up and you have defeated, you've conquered the day already because you were doing all of that. You haven't warmed up because warm up's a waste of time. And we do lifting weights and we do XYZ, or maybe you've run out in the cold and you've not really done a proper warm up and you come back in and your pernies are like, seizing for dear life, but it's okay because you've done it. It's a really strange thing because we don't really want to do mobility. I mean, you literally said there, you acknowledge you're so passionate about mobility, yet you acknowledge that there's people who will never do mobility in their life because people don't want to do it. It's not really in vogue. Like people aren't really
No,
talking about it.
it
It's not a face
hurts.
cream that you can buy. It takes time. It's just a bit rubbish. And we'll admit it. Like I'll admit
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You'll admit
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I run a mobility company, and the what I found is that the shift happens for people when two things happen to them when it comes to mobility work. It's really hard to get people in their 20s to care unless they're professional athletes, because when you're in your 20s, your body's like plastic and you can do whatever you want. You bounce back quickly, and you're just you're living large in a 20-year-old body, right? But two things happen that make people sort of find mobility, and that is, first of all, they get injured, and they are able, either a PT or a coach or someone's able to make the connection for them that their injury, that was caused by, or there was a contributing factor that their lack of range of motion caused it. That's number one. Or number two, they can't do the things they love anymore. So those are the two reasons where people find and then become evangelists of doing mobility. Is the classic, like, I play pickleball and then I injured myself and now I can't play pickleball. And it's not just that they can't play pickleball anymore, it's that, I don't know, are you guys having like a pickleball explosion over there? Because everybody here plays
Yeah, I
pickleball.
mean, I feel
Okay.
like less so, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
it's
definitely
coming.
it's
It's
happening. It's
coming.
happening.
Yeah. But yeah, people want to be able to do the things they love, and not just for the athletic piece of it, whether it's going to CrossFit or playing tennis or golf or playing pickleball or whatever it is. People want to be able to do that not only for the athletic piece, but because that's where their communities are. So when people get injured, all of a sudden they're shocked because they're like, I can no longer do this physical thing I love, where I know it's good for my health. And then they're also stripped out of their community, so it's difficult for their mental health. So that's how people often find and then become evangelists of doing mobility work. And unfortunately, that tends to be more and more people as they age, right? Like, we get some people in their 30s and 40s, and lots more people in their 50s. But what's interesting about mobility work that people don't realize is, unlike our muscle mass, unlike our bone density, that, despite all of our amazing efforts, we're still going to probably see at least a slight decline in those things. Your mobility actually doesn't have to change as you age, but you do need to pay attention to it, and you need to work on it and care about it a little bit. And I'm also shocked because, we'll go into a room where we're speaking and we'll say, how many people are in this room? Like, let's say there's 100 people in the room. How many of this people in this room are pain free? And we get like 10 people who raise their hand. So what that tells me is that a lot of us are living with like everyday kind of nagging pain. Now, I'm not talking about like a bone sticking out of your arm kind of pain. I'm talking about like, you know, kind of tweaks and musculoskeletal pain and, our back hurts today and then tomorrow our shoulders kind of tweaked and whatever. It turns out there's so much that you can do on your living room floor with like a couple simple tools and a little bit of information about mobility to actually really make your body feel better. Pays dividends because you can go out and be better at tennis and CrossFit and all these things you're doing because, the better your mobility, the better your range of motion, the more you're able to access the positions that your sport is asking you to access, the better you are going to be at those sports, which often is more motivating for people than like, not falling when they're 65. But yeah, I mean, it is hard. It's unsexy. We found people come to it when they come to it. To the extent that people are more focused on their longevity, mobility does need to be on the list. And again, the lowest hanging fruit there is, okay, you're one of those people who are never going to do it. Like, please just sit on the floor, like do that and, do nothing else. For people who are a little like, I'm all about figuring out ways to make things easy for myself. So like in my living room, I have a basket of like mobility tools that has a foam roller and a lacrosse ball and, a massage gun and a bunch of different stuff in there. So it's like, well, I'm already sitting on the floor. My calf is feeling kind of stiff. I'm going to work on my calf a little bit while I watch whatever I'm watching. I find that if I just make it easy to do it and I do it at times when I'm not smashed. That's also why we really recommend people do it at night. Most people aren't training before they're going to bed. And a nice mobility practice is also such a great recovery tool and really can help you fall asleep, stay asleep longer. Really can improve your sleep. So that's why we have always said like, hey, anytime you do it is fine, whenever it fits into your life. But like, if you can finish dinner, put your kids to bed, do life, whatever, watch a half an hour show, sit on the floor, work on your mobility a little bit. Like, trust me, you'll feel better.
And do you view that mobility as, you suggested the mobility tools that you can use, or is it as simple as doing some stretches? Like, what is a tangible way for
Yeah.
people to incorporate it?
Yeah, definitely some stretches would be great. And that's sort of how I would categorize floor sitting, right? It's a little bit more passive. Mobility work and soft tissue work is more active. And so you'll probably get a little bit more bang for your buck. We actually have this thing on our website. I think it's free. It's called a foam rolling protocol. Because this is another thing that drives Kelly and I insane. Like everybody just, the amount of like shitty quality foam rolling we see people do out there is all of it, which is why we created this protocol. I can see where people are like, oh, I foam rolled my calf and I didn't feel any better. Well, it turns out there is some technique to it. And just putting a foam roller on your calf and going like this a few times isn't going to move the needle. There is actually some technique. So, I would describe a true mobility practice as a little more active, where you're, taking into account your joints, you're adding in a breathing practice. You're trying to get your nervous system involved, trying to sort of pay attention to your joint range of motion. There's definitely some sort of the soft tissue work, I would say, is the lower quality stuff for people who have like more complicated injuries and pain. We have a lot more complicated self-care techniques that use bands and, other tools. But for the everyday person, like a couple of tools and a little bit of technique can go a long way.
And is mobility for everyone, or is it like a preventative thing that you would say? Or, obviously a lot of people, because we as a society don't like mobility, will speak for us all. A lot of the time will come to it, as you say, when we're injured, when we can't really do the things that we wanted to do or used to do, or then have that, connection because we can't go and play, football or whatever it is. But should we be actually caring about it beforehand, or is it actually fine to just worry about it when we're actually in the pain? Like, is there actually an advantage to incorporating it when we are, quote unquote, healthy beforehand and not?
Yes. I mean, oh my God, because, it's never too late to start. You can regain lost mobility, but oh man, I mean, it is so much easier. Take it from me. I have like the worst ankle mobility. Take it from me. It is so much easier to just do a little bit of work to maintain what you've got than try to regain mobility that you've lost. Um,
And to be
and
able to do the things that you like to do, because it's
yes,
all just physio,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's and so yeah, I mean, I would say, oh my God, if I, if we could get the 20 and 30-year-olds among us to just spend, and our whole philosophy since we started our company is 10 minutes a day. It's just not, don't go to a mobility class. Like no one's got time for that. Like just do 10 minutes a day on your living room floor. And it may seem like not that much, but if you add it up, even 5 days a week, that's 50 minutes of work you've done on your musculoskeletal system a week. And if you multiply that by months, by years, and if you start doing that in your 20s and 30s, man, that is going to pay dividends when you are later. Like you're going to be like the person who's like, oh, I can show up and say yes to all these adventures and all my other friends are injured. Like that's going to be the difference.
And we only have one skeleton, so really, when you put it like that, there's not really spares that we can cash in on, unless
Yeah.
you're going down the surgical route, which is not something that really anyone would intend
Yeah.
to go down.
We have to do maintenance on our body. Like I had a friend who told me, like, imagine, this is of course for your musculoskeletal system and all of these other longevity things we're talking about. But like, think about it like this. Like, imagine your parents, like, think about what's your dream car, Emily? Like, if you could have like a car that you're like, I'd be so stoked to have this car. Like,
I'm a
what
Land
is it?
Rover girl, really. I'm a
Yeah.
Land
Okay.
Rover
So,
girl.
so you've got
Yeah.
a Land Rover Defender. That's what your parents give you the day
Oh,
you're born. Your parents give you a Defender the day you're born, and then they're like, this is the one car you get for the rest of your life. How
mhm.
would you do some maintenance on that car, right? Like you'd change the oil and make sure you like you did your routine maintenance, and if something went wrong, you'd fix it. Well, like that's how to think about the body, like, and that's how to think about mobility work. Like mobility work is like doing an oil change on your car. It's just like doing a little bit of maintenance. To me, it's ultimately invaluable, and the people who have and retain their mobility are going to age the best,
Yeah.
the best of the
Yeah,
rest
no,
of us.
I love the car analogy though, because I've used it previously on episodes, but if we're buying petrol, you can get that premium lovely petrol that is supposedly good for your car, and we're not going to question whether it actually is better or not. We're going to accept that it is in this analogy. And then there's the crappy kind of cheap stuff that you don't know if it's all watered down or whatever, and they both work and they both will make your car run. However, if we are fueling ourselves with a load of crappy food that will get us through the day, keep us alive, keep us breathing, get us, from A to B, or we're actually preparing some food that's tasty, actually good for us, has some good ingredients that have, actually been outside, not just processed from
Right.
chemicals, then actually it's going to be a lot better for us, like in terms of longevity. But then, we might get a bit more. It's probably better, miles per gallon or whatever for our brains. We're going to feel a little bit more full. We're going to have less ups and downs and spikes in energy. And it is just that sort of same thing. So we can take a lot from these car analogies. And also you talk about, the basics of fitness. And I think it's really nice to have a bit of an example of that. And you talk about the base camp practices. So you've got several different points. So I'll read them out. So you've got the walking 8,000 steps a day, which we've touched on that. We've got 8 hours of sleep at night, lying in bed with no phone. And then you've 800 grams of fruit and veg. You've got zero point 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, sitting on the ground for 30 minutes a day, and being outside for 180 minutes a week. And I
Yep.
really like that framework. Is that sort of the main points that you've worked out that lead to
Yep.
a healthy life in terms of something that's actually tangible?
Yeah, I mean, we found that those are like the biggest levers you can push. And like I said earlier, like nobody disputes that these are the biggest levers you can push for your health. Now, what I would add to that is also a strength and conditioning practice. People do need to be doing that. But what we love about these base camp practices is look, like life happens. Like we run a longevity strength and conditioning program called the Starrett system. Like stuff happens. You go on vacation, your kid gets sick, you have to travel for work. And what always gets eliminated in those times is like your formal exercise, right? Like kid gets sick, you can't go to the gym, you don't work out for 3 days. And I think people think like, throwing like my health practices are doomed, right? Because we've sort of lionized this formal exercises, like again, this box you check off where you've won fitness, right? But what we're trying to train our people to do is to get so good at these base camp practices that they're always defaulting to that. Because if you sleep for 8 hours, walk 8,000 steps, sit on the floor, go outside, eat fruits and vegetables and protein, oh my God, like you could live to be 100 just doing that. Like my grandmother never went to the gym. My grandmother just moved a lot and like did these other base camp practices, right? So what
And
we
actually made
always,
her own food.
yeah, made her own food. And what we recommend people do is like, yes, we have a strength and conditioning program. Yes, you need to strengthen and condition. But when life happens and stuff gets busy, stuff gets crazy, and you don't have time to work out, like it's okay. You can pick up your formal exercise when you can, when your kid gets well, when you get back from your trip, whatever. But in the meantime, double down on your base camp practices, just move a lot. And it turns out that like just those base camp practices alone, which again, you can do amid a busy, crazy working 10-hour day kind of life, raising kids. Like I've done it. I know you can do base camp and still have a life. And you've actually gotten a ton of movement and done a ton for your health and your well-being. And then when stuff gets crazy and you have time to train, go and train. But yeah, we've just been really trying to say like, cut out the noise. Like,
Mhm.
I went across the street a year ago and my neighbor Russell is like, "Hey, so I'm thinking about taking this supplement where it's going to help me lengthen my telomeres." And I was like, "Bro, A, you don't even know what your telomeres are. B, like you've lost the forest for the trees here when it comes to your health. Like this is crazy. Um, you don't even eat vegetables, Russell. Like, what are we talking about?" So, to me, once you've mastered base camp, like mastered it, like you're getting base camp 75% of your days. When you've mastered base camp, then ask me what supplements you should take. Then ask me if you should sauna and cold plunge. Then ask me if you should get a red bed or red light therapy or like whatever all this peripheral stuff is, all of which I'm fine with all that. Like, I'm not against all this like fancy health optimization stuff and it can be fun. But I'm like, I don't think you should literally be like allowed to do those things until you have mastered base camp. Like when you've mastered base camp, and then run into me on the street. Because if you run into me on the street and say, "Hey, Juliet, should I be taking magnesium threonate?" My question to you is going to be, how much did you sleep last night? And how many vegetables did you eat yesterday? And if you literally can't answer that off the like right away, then I'm going to say, dude, taking magnesium threonate or not is not your issue. So
Mhm.
master the basics. And then once you're crushing the basics, like 75% of the time, then be like, could I optimize with a little of this or optimize with a little of that? But, you know, 90% of us are not mastering the basics.
And it's such a boring answer because you said right at the start that we know all of the things, but they're boring and they're hard. And, they're back to the unsexy list of things that we're adding
Yeah.
to. Mobility's got some friends now. It's got all of these parts that we all
Yeah.
know that are easy, that are often free. We can go
Oh,
outside and it
yeah.
doesn't cost us anything. And it is just that behavioral change. It's not just that okay, I'm gonna do all of these adding in things. And to summarize, what would you like people to take away from this conversation? If there's one point you want to emphasize of maybe where to start, what would you say is the key thing?
I mean, I think the key thing actually is to let go of this idea that what you're doing needs to be cool and Instagrammable. Because that's not what is going to move the needle for you when it comes to your health. And embrace the boring, embrace the unsexy, master those things. And then, if you have time and extra bandwidth, then you can enjoy the sexy. But I would say that, try not to get sucked into internet trends. Like, for me, if I see an influencer say the word toxic, it's like an immediate unfollow. If I, like just I think you've got to get real discerning about what's out there and really just say, hey, like if this person really isn't all about the basics as their at least their core and then are adding on these optimizations, like it's an unfollow.
Mhm.
So I say like figure out a way to, just make the basics fun and cast away all this BS out there because there's a lot of it.
It's funny, these basics that we went through, they've been around for many, many years. And yet we're having to almost de influence ourselves from, but I really need this red light therapy or my skin will never look the same again. We need to spend all of our money on X, Y, and Z and however many fitness classes a week when actually maybe we just need to go outside for a walk. Maybe we just need to breathe some fresh air or eat some good food that we've made from scratch that is probably going to be cheaper than whatever we're getting delivered to our house
Yeah.
anyway. And
Seriously.
it
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like these things have been around for I mean, we talked about, your book that you wrote 10 years ago, which isn't that long ago, but 10 years still. And it's so applicable, if not even more applicable today as technology's developed even more and taken up more and more of our time. And it's that insidious, it takes it up so gradually that we don't care. My example of we reward ourselves by looking at smaller screens or bigger screens after looking at our other screen. And we think, gosh, I have earned this because I've completed fitness, I've completed work, and now I get
Right.
to sit in a comfy seat and stare at a screen. And that's not bad, it's not the enemy, but it's just being aware of, hold on, but where is this fitting into my actual life enjoyment, life enhancement? It doesn't need to be productive all the time, but it
Well,
is
that's
just
the
that.
thing. I mean, I know we're at the end, but what I want to
There's so
add
much
is
to
that
say.
I do feel like in this longevity space and all of this health and Instagram information we're all getting all the time, like, you know, we've sort of made it so prescriptive that it's like not
Mhm,
fun. Like the fun things about being a human are like going out to dinner with our friends and not being a weirdo and bringing our own protein source because we're worried. Like that's not fun or cool. Like the fun things about being a human are being able to travel and eat the local food and, go to Oktoberfest and have a freaking beer and like, that's what's fun about being a human. And like, let me tell you this thing that came across my screen, which I think is so like this to me said it all about where we are. There's a picture on the left of Brian Johnson, who's the guy who's trying to live forever and spending all his money doing it. Um, and then contrasting that was this like 85-year-old Italian guy who's like way too tan and like super wrinkled, but he's lean and he's smoking a cigarette and holding a glass of wine. And he looks so stoked, this guy. And then you contrast that to Brian Johnson, who like sleeps in a bubble and takes 700 supplements a day and is like pale and has had a bunch of plastic surgery. And you're like, okay, which of these two guys do you want to be? Because for me, unquestionably, like I want to be like the fun Italian guy, who's like enjoying my actual life. And I haven't optimized my life to the point where like it's not even fun anymore. Like that does
mhm.
not sound fun. So part of this is about like having a fun life and like,
Exactly.
let's just be normal.
Exactly, and that's completely linked around to literally what we started off with, of what is that health? Like, what does that mean to you? It's not living forever and ever, but it's actually enjoying, like, having a glass of wine, sitting in the sun, and having connection with people. So I think that really summarizes it, in the conversation. And Julia, if people want to follow you online, work with you, read your books, where should they go?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Juliet Starrett. Our company is called The Ready State. So it's thereadystate.com. And you can learn all about our various mobility programs, our coaching program, which is called the Starrett System. That's all at thereadystate.com. And then our company Instagram is at the Ready State on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julia. Wow, we've covered a lot, but I think it's so applicable and yeah, just so simple but difficult, and it's so important to really apply. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Emily.